Hey everybody, it's Eric from epautos.com, your Libertarian car guy, and I'm trucking down the road here in a 15 Audi Q5 TDI diesel. One of the beautiful things about these diesel-powered vehicles, hopefully you'll be able to see my gauge cluster here. I'm operating at close to 70 miles an hour, and the engine is running at about just under 1,500 RPMs, so about 1,400 RPMs. That's one of the reasons why diesels deliver such outstanding mileage on the highway. They really don't need to rev very much to keep you going, and that means they don't really need to burn that much fuel to keep you going. This thing gets about 30 miles on the highway, and it averages probably around 24. And that's still really good for a fairly large, this is mid-sized, fairly large, pretty heavy, crossover SUV without the best aerodynamic profile you could possibly get. That being said, the mileage would be a lot better, and the economic case for a diesel-powered vehicle would be a lot stronger if the manufacturers were able to design these vehicles to optimize efficiency rather than to fractionally decrease emissions. I've written and ranted about this before. You probably have heard in the media about various laws and proposals and regulations that will curb or lower the emissions output of diesels and gas engines. But they're disingenuous and fundamentally dishonest in that we reached a point of diminishing returns with emissions probably 20 years ago, at which point all cars are fuel injected, all cars have three-way catalytic converters, and computers to precisely monitor air-fuel ratios and adjust accordingly, as well as onboard diagnostics that immediately tell the driver if there's an issue with the emission system via the check engine flag. Since that time, the stuff that comes out of the tailpipe of any car is approximately 95, 96, 97% carbon dioxide and water vapor. Now, whether you believe in anthropogenic global warming, global cooling, climate change, what have you, those gases have nothing whatsoever to do with air quality issues. They do not form smog, they do not trigger asthma, they don't make your kids have respiratory problems. So what's going on here is a quest to cut back the final approximately 3 to 5% of what's coming out of your tailpipe by a fractional percentage. And you can say that there's merit to that. You know, a 0.5% reduction per vehicle scaled over, say, several hundred thousand or even a million vehicles, however large the production total or the vehicle fleet may be. But it's not a particularly significant reduction. And I think that has to be weighed against the dramatically increased fuel inefficiency that results, particularly with regard to diesels. Those of you listening to this who are older than 40 will probably be able to remember the late 70s and the early 80s. And at that time, you could go out and buy something like a Rabbit, a Volkswagen Rabbit diesel. A little Rabbit diesel was easily able to get 50 miles per gallon or more, despite the fact that it did not have the advantages that modern vehicles have. It did not have an overdrive transmission, did not have the fuel metering capability that modern engines have, didn't have a lot of the other advances that are commonplace today in modern vehicles, and yet it was capable of getting significantly better gas mileage than the best diesel cars can deliver today. Indeed, better mileage than hybrids give you. And it did so with a relatively simple engine, relatively simple car, relatively low-cost car. These days, in order to achieve compliance with the emissions edicts that continue to pour out of Washington, the engineers have had to modify the engines, and the fuel industry has had to alter the formulation and the distillation/refining process that gives you diesel fuel. So you get a 1-2 punch. The fuel itself is more expensive, significantly so. Again, people over 40 will remember when diesel fuel cost less than gasoline. Now, of course, diesel fuel costs significantly more than gasoline does. So that's a problem, and it's not a little bit of a problem. Diesel typically costs about 50 cents or so more per gallon than regular unleaded. That becomes a huge factor when you start to calculate the total ownership costs of a gas versus a diesel car, particularly when you're paying more for the diesel, a lot more nowadays. And the reason you're paying a lot more is because of all the stuff that has to be fitted to a diesel engine in order to make it 50 state compliant, meaning that the manufacturer, Audi for example, or Volkswagen, can legally sell the diesel powered model in all 50 states. For a period of time, they were unable to sell diesel powered cars in a number of major markets, for example California, some of the New England states, which had even stricter standards than the federal standards. And that really makes it hard for the manufacturer to justify offering things for sale at all. Now, for those of you listening to this who think, oh, Peters is just for fouling the environment, he doesn't care about pollution, he's indifferent to the children, I'd like to point out that in Western Europe, most of Western Europe, all of Western Europe, I'm pretty sure, diesels constitute better than half the vehicle fleet, the passenger vehicle fleet. The preponderance of the diesel-powered vehicles in service in Europe are not trucks and not SUVs, they're cars. Most every manufacturer that sells vehicles in Europe sells diesel variants of those vehicles. Now, the emission standards in Europe, I assure you, are every bit as strict, indeed in some respects stricter than they are in the United States. However, they're different. And again, the problem is that Volkswagen or Audi, Mercedes, any other manufacturer that built diesel-powered vehicles to comply with the standards that are in effect in Europe would then have to modify or adjust, reconfigure their vehicle in order to comply with the slightly different standards that are in force in the United States. And again, these people are businessmen, and they do the math, they calculate what the cost would be to make their vehicles compliant versus what they could expect to return in a profit by selling them here, and they've generally concluded that it's not worth it to them to do it, except with regard to high-end vehicles. You may have noticed that for the most part, the diesel-powered vehicles that are available in the United States are cars like this Audi Q5 and other prestige-branded high-end vehicles, most of which are priced well over $30,000. The majority of them are priced in the $40,000, $50,000, and $60,000 range and up. A couple of weeks ago, for instance, I did a review of the new BMW 7 Series sedan. That's BMW's top-of-the-line sedan. They put the diesel in that, and that's a six-figure car with a few options. So the reason for that, the manufacturers have concluded that they can outfit a given car with all the features and bells and whistles and the diesel, and it becomes a question then not of selling so much the economy of the vehicle, but some of the other attributes of the diesel that I mentioned peripherally when I began this rant, such as the fact that the engine has abundant power without revving, very easygoing power plant, also tremendous legs. A lot of these vehicles can go 600, 700, or even more miles on the highway before you have to fill up, due to the fact that the diesel is so much more fuel efficient than the otherwise comparable gas engine. So that's why people are buying them. They're not buying them based on economy. I think in fact, the only car that you can get currently in the United States that's modestly priced with a diesel engine is the Volkswagen Jetta and I guess the Golf. So Volkswagen sells two. Chevy also sells a diesel-powered version of the Cruze, but it's a top-of-the-line trim. I think the base price is just under $27,000 for the diesel-equipped Cruze, so by no means a choice that you would make chiefly on the basis of the economics of it. Mazda was supposed to have had a Sky D diesel version of the, or Sky D diesel engine available in the 3, which is their compact sedan and hatchback wagon, but it has not yet appeared. I wrote a review of that car, I guess about 2 weeks ago. It's up on epautos.com, and according to my sources within Mazda, the diesel engine is basically circling the airport with no ETA as to when it's going to be allowed to land, and chiefly that has to do with emissions reasons. So there you have it. Diesels perverse incentives have resulted in diesels becoming kind of a high-end option for high-end cars. No longer really the choice to make for people looking for an economical way to get around. Chief reason for that being these perverse incentives imposed by government, ostensibly for reasons that people on a superficial level will think are great, lowered emissions and so on, but in fact really amount to chasing diminishing returns. So that's the end of today's rant. Thank you for listening. Please come on down to epautos.com for more, and we will catch up with you next time. Thank you.